Welcome again to another in our series of questions Jesus asked. Our question today comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verse 18. What is the kingdom of God like, and to what shall I compare it? To give our question its context, we'll read verses 18 through 21 of Luke, chapter 13. He said, therefore, what is the kingdom of God like, and to what shall I compare it? It is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his garden, and it grew and became a tree, and the birds of the air made nests in its branches. And again he said, to what shall I compare the kingdom of God? It is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour until it was all leavened. As part of a creative writing class years ago, our class was given the task to put into words a description of a whole host of things. As you can tell by my use of things, I lack a certain flair for the creative. We would be given objects like a rock and told to write about it. Let's see, it's hard, and this one is jagged around the edges, and it's grayish and blackish or whitish in color. It feels kind of smooth with a bit of a rough type of texture. Well, so much for sight and feel. Well, how about what a banana tastes like? Absolutely. I've tasted hundreds of them. I know the moment it hits my tongue that it is a banana. So it tastes like a banana. Well, not so good with the palate either. Now, color. How about the color yellow? What does the color yellow look like? Well, it's bright like the sun, only you can look at it. Well, not really like the noonday sun, but more like the morning sun as it is coming above the horizon. Like a maple leaf in autumn when it's ready to fall off the limb. It is at this point the teacher has to realize that my talents might better lie in the field of manual labor. For all my efforts, I just couldn't get the knack of descriptive writing. It's tough. I suppose that's why only a gifted few make it as successful writers. But to describe the indescribable, how would I describe color to a blind person? Or what words would I use to encapsulate music's sound to the person who was born deaf? Well, you can take each of the 5 senses and attempt to describe something to a person who lacks that sense. All you can do is, well, all you can do. If that person has never experienced that sense, whether it is smell, taste, touch, sound, or sight, then you're at a definite disadvantage. You can attempt to compensate by using what senses they have to relate. Yet, all you can do is compare. Jesus begins to teach about the kingdom of God, for that is the term that Luke uses. If you turn to the same passage in Matthew, he uses this term, as we read in Matthew 13, verses 31 through 33. He put another parable before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in the field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour till it was all leavened. Matthew uses the term kingdom of heaven. Mark and Luke used the term kingdom of God. Because all 3 are speaking of the same thing, we can conclude that these terms mean the same thing. The kingdom of God is the same as the kingdom of heaven. Matthew will, on occasion, use the term kingdom of God, but only Matthew uses the term kingdom of heaven among the gospel writers. So don't be confused when they use different terms. They mean the same thing. Now consider that Jesus, the Son of God, the Word, as John calls him, has come down to earth to describe something new, something that no one has seen or heard of or experienced before. For sure, Jesus is not a student in a creative writing 101 class with no experience. He is God. By him, the universe was created, for so we are told in Hebrews 1 1 through 3. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. Paul says as much in Colossians 1 15 through 17. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Jesus has a complete command of language. He created language. When you think about it, John's description of him is perfect in John 1 1 through 2. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. A word is the expression of a thought, and a thought cannot exist without a word to describe it, and a word cannot exist without a thought. The Word, and the one whom Jesus called the Father, and Daniel called the Ancient of Days in Daniel chapter 7, verses 9, 13, and 22, are coetaneous. They exist at the same time from eternity. One does not exist without the other. I say all of that to say that Jesus is the perfect one to describe the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. Jesus has no problem coming up with ways to describe this coming kingdom, which, by the way, is the church. For Jesus tells us this in Matthew chapter 16, verses 18 through 19. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. At this point, the kingdom of heaven, the church, are as yet not begun. For so Jesus tells his disciples in Mark's gospel, Mark chapter 9, verse 1. And he said to them, truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God after it has come with power. Since Judas Iscariot died, it must have been after his death, for he was the first of the disciples to die. Jesus must describe that wondrous kingdom that is coming to a people who are devoid of the senses it takes to comprehend. As he begins to teach, Jesus must use highly figurative language for reasons he explains to his disciples in Matthew chapter 13, verses 10 through 13. Then the disciples came and said to him, why do you speak to them in parables? And he answered them, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. But to them it has not been given. For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. This coming kingdom is so vast, so multifaceted, that one illustration simply won't do. He will use such things as a sower, a field sown with tares, a mustard seed, a pearl, a hidden treasure in a field, leaven, a dragnet, and much more. Those who follow in the kingdom and church and understand and then teach, Jesus describes this way in Matthew 13:52. And he said to them, therefore every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. Scribes like Paul, Peter, James, John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and the Hebrew writer have done this wondrously. Have you understood the things that they have written about the kingdom? And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another of the questions that Jesus asked.